Hey, Patrick here with Denali Racing and Performance. This video is going to showcase a new product I've been hinting about for the last 6 months, and that is my Turbo 400 Ultra Valve. What is the Ultra Valve? Well, it replaces the OEM manual valve in your Turbo 400. Most of your billet, or even obviously the factory one, the valve body comes with a standard manual valve that looks very similar to this, or is this. Other companies make different variations to be able to control or adapt to a valve body to give you different features. I'm going to explain exactly what my Ultra Valve does. So here is the Ultra Valve here, okay? It's an aluminum body, anodized. It has 2 chambers, a feed chamber and a bleed chamber, okay? What we consider more like individual circuits, okay? That's machined out of aluminum. The tip here is threaded on the retainer knob here, okay? And that's made out of titanium, and that's threaded into here, okay? The end gets a plug that is tapped there for 1/8 inch NPT. We have to do that to manufacture this valve. All right. What you'll see here is a very common components. We'll start off with our valve body here. Okay. All right. Looks pretty common area to locate your trans-brake solenoid. Here is a very, very common trans-brake solenoid manifold. Okay. This takes an internal trans-brake. We have our solenoid that would go on here with our internal valve. Okay, I manufacture these here, okay? The other component you may not be too familiar with, I'm just bringing it in the video to explain the adaptations for this valve body. This is our quick stage converter feed manifold. It just doesn't have the solenoid on it. None of these have the solenoid on it. But this is our quick stage converter feed manifold here, okay? This Ultra Valve here is patent pending. I have a few iterations. This is the final, okay? And obviously it's designed to replace the manual valve here, but not just replace, give you a whole lot more features, okay? I'll explain. This valve body here is, I'll flip it around, it's going to look very similar to what you see out there. The only difference is I moved a couple circuits around to make it more efficient and obviously to benefit everything that I want to package in this valve body with our Ultra Valve. To jump off here, if you don't know, if you want to try to understand the manual valve here, what it's doing is as fluid's coming in, feed from the pump, this is allowing it to chamber the fluid in sequence when you're shifting the vehicle, okay, to allow it to go through its appropriate gear changes. All that is done over the valve, okay, so everything is outside the valve, it's coming in, it's coming out. If you're not too familiar with it, that's the basis of it. It's allowing fluid to come into a chamber with these different chamber walls here, okay? And it's preventing it to continue to flow until you command a shift change. With our Ultra Valve, what we're doing is we're actually feeding into the center of the valve, and then it's distributing it through the inside of the valve and back out. There's actually a little bit benefit, obviously a benefit to it, but a lot more control. And hopefully you can understand and follow along as I explain. So those are the differences. We're just sending the fluid in a different manner. And now, again, with the valve body here, conventionally you would see a very common product with this manifold here, this trans-brake manifold, be mounted right about in that location. Okay, so what I have done is I have rotated it here and put it in that direction there. The trans-brake solenoid comes out over here, kind of pointing towards the back of the valve, the manual valve. It's pretty standard height thicknesses here. This is about 700 thou, a little bit thicker in some areas. Overall, it's pretty consistent. Okay. Again, everything is the same. Now, this is a first gear leave. Now, let me explain the features that this valve body offers. So we're going to have first gear leave only on this valve body here, and I'll explain other variations in a second. We're going to have first gear low band apply. That's constant. And we're also going to have safe neutral. Okay, so this is a 3-speed. Now, I designed most of these around a 3-speed transmission because it's the one that's lacking. If you have a 2-speed transmission, you don't really need a lot of these features in the beginning, like low band apply, only needing that for reverse gear and trans brake. All right, so we have low band apply. We have obviously our trans brake feed. We have forward, intermediate, and high gear, okay, or the direct. All right, so those are the features here. I do offer, or I am going to offer, a 1 and 2 leave, same thing, but it's going to be obviously, there really isn't much different. A lot of the controlling I do is completely, it's not unheard of, but it's not very common. How I control and what I have to control is low band apply. However, in this first gear leave only, that's very simple to do, and I'll explain. Again, this is a park reverse neutral. Okay, so we go from park, it's reverse and neutral until you apply the trans brake. It is neutral. Apply the trans brake, you get reverse. You get 1, 2, 3, and then you get safe neutral. Now, the benefit, obviously, to this, my ultra valve, is I have a bleed circuit in here. Okay, it's very critical shifting into second gear from first to be able to bleed off low band apply. If you don't, bad things happen. Okay, so it's very critical in the timing of this valve and how it works through the valve body. Very, very critical to be able to bleed off low band at a certain time as it's entering or shifting into second gear. So that's one of the added benefits to that. For safe neutral, okay, and if you don't know, if you heard the term clean neutral, so you have clean neutral, what that does is bleed and semi-feed the forward, okay? Now, to explain, if you're not, if you're not familiar, when we shift into neutral, okay, and the engine's still running on a conventional valve body, typically what's out there, if you shift into neutral or shut the engine off, it overspeeds the high gear drum, causing potential damage to the sprag of the drum and possible explosion of the drum. Typically doesn't happen on a billet drum, your high gear drum, okay? What I want to do as a drag and drive type base transmission, I'm going to be driving it back to the pit. If there's a problem, I'm going to shut it off, the engine. But if there's not, I'm not going to shut it off. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be shifting into safe neutral, and that's going to completely disconnect the forward apply. So basically, the engine's still running, but we have no forward applied drum. And what that means is it allows basically the engine to idle down. There's a lot of benefits to that. However, it's still hydraulically keeping your intermediate clutch and your high gear clutch engaged to be able to not overspeed the high gear drum, because the high gear drum is connected technically to your drive shaft. And that's whatever, depending on the ratio, you could be spinning it up to 3 times the drive shaft RPM. So you do the math. I mean, on average, 7,500 RPM is 21,000 RPM, give or take. That could overspeed your sprag and really hurt your transmission. So what we're doing now is just hydraulically locking that high gear drum to the drive shaft, just to keep everything happy, okay, and not overspeeding the high gear drum. And again, the engine has to be running because we need to be pumping fluid, even if it's at idle as it idles down. Now, safe neutral, for me, I want to be able to let off, go into safe neutral, okay? And then from there, my engine idles down normally, and I'm slowing down rapidly fast, either on the foot brake or on the parachute. And I don't want to keep the engine in gear at 7,500 RPM, let's say, and it's still screaming, yet I'm idling down, dipping down, possibly starving the oil feed to the oil pump. So safe neutral allows me to go basically into neutral, disconnecting to forward, allowing the engine to idle down on its own, okay? And then idling down, having plenty of oil, no problem. And as soon as I pull off and stop, I can put it in park or in drive again if I gotta grab my chute, and I can go back to the pit. Again, clean neutral, or as they say, dirty neutral, it's still kind of feeding, but also bleeding. So it's not super efficient. Does it work? Yes, but it's not the best example. All right, so back to the valve body. I'll flip it over here. You're going to see it. I'm not going to get too crazy into showing you every little cavity. If you know what these are, you're going to see the difference. But generally, we'll start off with our trans brake feed here. Okay, supply 2 here. Now we use a typical check ball. All right, that's pretty common. Fitting our high gear, we have our intermediate here. Okay, this one here is our forward apply. This here is our trans brake feed supply. This is our main feed here, and this one here is our low band apply. And basically, it really isn't much different from a typical reverse manual valve body. However, we're moving a little bit of the main feed. We obviously jumped over with our trans brake feed. We have our, everything's kind of a little bit tightened up here, but typically forward, intermediate, and high gear, all that stuff is generally the same. And again, we have our bleed circuit there to work as we're shifting along, especially first or second, to bleed off. And then we have our safe neutral, okay? That's generally the basics about that. Having my ultra valve gives you the ability to manipulate the circuits to benefit you. When we go to safe neutral, there is a void in my valve here, not a void, but basically a dead spot there that closes off forward apply, but still feeding the remainder, intermediate and high gear. All right, so we have that. And again, the bleed circuit is specifically timed to bleed off our low band. If you don't know, not a lot of these valve bodies, billet valve bodies, reverse manual valve bodies, that's what this is, they don't come with low band apply in first gear. It's only being applied to our, for our trans brake or reverse, okay? And if you don't know, when you're in forward gear, it activates technically reverse. And then when you bump, it quickly releases our solenoid to get you to bump forward on the trans brake. And then when you release, it just eliminates low band as well as feed to the high gear drum that allow you to launch. So with low band apply in first gear, what could happen is, especially in the higher horsepower stuff, if you're launching without that, it's not as common. It does happen, but when you start getting the higher horsepower stuff and you don't have low band apply in first gear, when you go to shift to second, you spin the tire out, tire shake, it could damage the low roller clutch. That is a common thing. Keeping that thing happy in the higher horsepower stuff, 2,000 horsepower and up, is not an easy thing. And most of the valve bodies that are either built by a specific builder, performance shop, you know, the big ones out there, they're individually tweaking that circuit per that requirement for that transmission. And it's a lot of tweaking of the manual valve that they have to do. Here it's very simple, okay? How I designed it and how it works. So when you let off on the trans brake, you're only now disabling your high gear. And it's totally fine. It's actually normal. It's a stock thing to have your low band on in first gear to keep from over speeding that low roller clutch in the event there's a tire spin, tire shake. So it's a nice thing to do, to have even from factory. You're not really going to notice it. The best thing I can think about is if you ever hear of going in low gear downhill, keep your car in low gear. Well, that band prevents from the factory your reaction carrier around your low roller clutch from over speeding. So it just locks that up. So that's the intended idea when people say use your low gear. Imagine not having that going downhill, you're over speeding that. And if you shift into second or whatever, you could possibly cause some damage to it. It's not a very robust system, and some people do update it to a full sprag, but 99% of you are not going to have that ability or option. So now we have this. It's just another safety measure to keep your transmission alive, okay? And it can be done with a manual valve, but from my experience, it is done at a very specific level. Not difficult if you know what you're doing, but a specific level. It's not needed traditionally on most of the billet reverse manual valve bodies that you see out there. Obviously, you can go to a factory modified to full, and it does offer those features. But for the higher horsepower stuff, even now, it's not uncommon to have a 1,500 horsepower LS or Coyote, even more. So to have this feature with your 400 is pretty nice, okay? And again, when you let off on the trans brake, you still have low band apply. So none of that stuff is moving. Everything is where it's supposed to be. And as soon as you shift into second gear, The bleed circuit prevents it from holding that on. And there's also a limit to where we don't want to cause too much drag as it's trying to come off. So there is a calculation to that I've worked on to get it to where it needs to be. And obviously the safe neutral is the biggest benefit there too. So besides having second gear leave, which I will have, and it's really no different, I'm not going to get into that explanation yet because I'm still doing the legal side of it. But having that is going to supersede this valve body because there's no reason to offer both, and they're not going to cost any different. There are obviously additional things, but I'm going to be working those prices in. This is due to come out in January of 2026. It's going to be the 1+2. I do have some people who are interested in this valve body as it sits, so I'm kind of working on that as well. But obviously, with the internal trans brake, everything else, going back to my converter feed solenoid here, every one of these is going to come with the ability to bolt this on, okay? And that gives you the ability to control your converter if you proceed to do the additional steps within the kit that you could purchase. I will offer a price for this and the entire thing for if you purchase it. That's something I'll work on later on with a discount for that. But basically, it's going to have these holes in here. However, they're going to be blocked off if you choose not to get the converter feed kit, my manifold kit, and solenoid. So you're going to get everything you typically would get when purchasing one of these things. You're going to get a check ball. You're going to get the trans brake solenoid. You're going to get the high gear drum updated springs. Okay, so you're going to get everything typically you would get. The separator plate is no different than the majority of them out there. I make everything here, including these separator plates, okay, to the way I want to make them. All right, so swapping over to what you have or there's nothing additional you need to do. There's nothing you need to do to the transmission unless you are purchasing this kit. I meant to the case. There's nothing you do to the case unless you're purchasing my converter feed kit. So keep that in mind. But really cool. I'm going to have some videos too. I might tie it into this one here. I'm not sure yet of this running on the dyno because I'm sure everybody's going to want to see this thing actually work. It does. I'm going to have some dyno videos of this. So this is, again, the final complete ultra valve body that I'm going to be offering. Price-wise yet, I'm not too certain. It's not going to be as costly as, let's say, like a Wicked, like a very basic one. It's going to be up there. I'm trying to be fair just because, listen, Extreme Automatics makes one of the best internal trans brakes, not copying it. There's nothing wrong with this trans brake design. With the higher horsepower stuff, Lonnie's design is far superior just because of the way that the solenoid does. It pulls versus pushes. These are all a push type solenoid. He has a pull type solenoid. And it's basically, it's just the way it is. A little bit bigger. It's a little bit bigger than this, but relatively the same. Could I incorporate it on here? Absolutely. I'm sure Lonnie would allow that for me to incorporate one on there. I really don't see the need, benefit. Again, I think it comes down to the consistency of the trans brake versus the actual benefit. I'm sure people, and I would agree, to the flow benefit of that trans brake manifold body from Extreme Automatics. But to start getting into that is really, it does come down to the quality of the solenoid itself, which is the typical ones you see out there. They do make very high quality and very low quality ones, but relatively they all work. I mean, some of the higher end, Rosslers or Mickeys where they're an external, it's all the same solenoid. There's no difference. There's a wiring factor. There's a lot of other factors that people could argue make this one kind of look bad. I'm telling you, it's not bad. It's going to work just fine. Again, Lonnie's just a little bit different. I just think superior to it would be the solenoid itself. A little bit larger, can handle the current better, and holding force as a pull versus a push. So these are a push. that's how I'm offering it. That's how it's going to be offered. But so hopefully you understand as best as possible the features and benefits to this that are not out there and not very common unless it's custom tweaked and built by a shop. And this is guaranteed to work in your transmission, especially on a 3-speed. 2-speed, now, I mean, obviously 1+2, but it is going to be a 3-speed transmission, because if I make a 2-speed with that, there's really no added benefit to a 2-speed versus just having this type of valve and modified valve body that's pretty generic and common out there for a 2-speed. There's no benefit. You don't need a low band apply first gear because you don't have first gear. Technically, you don't have a forward gear to worry about that reaction carrier overspeeding. Can it happen? Yes, in extreme cases, especially if you blow the rear gear set out of it, it's going to take out a whole lot of stuff in that transmission. So thanks for watching. I'll try to keep you updated too as well. Probably not going to put a video of the transmission running yet. I want to get this one in and get it set up, and I have a much nicer transmission that's for my truck that this is going into. So the other one is disgusting, but it's the pig, you know, it's a shop pig, so we test on it. But yeah, I'll have that video as well. But so look for that. Look for this to be out in 2026 in the beginning of January. And price-wise, I'll get back to people on that one. So thanks again. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. Please check out my other videos. Kind of go back and forth on what I do. Obviously, machining. Comment helps. Questions, I mean, I respond to the majority of them. All those are reasonable. And again, share, like, subscribe, comment, all the good stuff. And check back too. I'll definitely have a video up of this thing running on the trans dyno here pretty soon. Thanks, everyone.